I want to welcome everybody and thank you for taking this time out tonight because I know many of you are just getting off of work and have had some very, very busy days, and I completely understand. But I also wanted to have this particular workshop because I also understand what it's like to be in a doctoral program or a master's program, and you hear about this thesis and the dissertation, and it really is almost like somebody speaking another language. It feels overwhelming. Can anybody agree to that a little bit? Give me some thumbs up, right? Because all you've heard probably from other people is how you're going to have to write a whole bunch of stuff, right? You're going to have to write these books. And so, what I want to do is, I want to sort of demystify the process for you tonight. And so, we're going to talk about what it means to write the thesis and the dissertation proposal, right? Because that's your first step. And as I was talking to Angie, Angie was telling me that is what she's already kind of thinking about and working on. So I want to give you a heads up and get you started on this so you won't be so blindsided about what is expected of you. Everybody on board?
Yeah.
So the goals of the workshop essentially are the goals of the workshop kind of that you need before you actually start writing the draft itself, right? Because there are a couple of things that you need to know before you even start the writing process. Because when you're writing the proposal, a lot of it is about establishing your rhetoric and the organization of the task. So the goals of the workshop are as follows: to introduce strategies to help you bridge the gap between your coursework and the beginning of your research, to help you understand the rhetorical situation of your thesis slash dissertation proposal and the common elements of the proposal, to introduce you to practical rhetorical and grammatical principles of writing effective proposals, and provide you with actual tips and strategies that help you when you start writing, drafting, and revising the work itself. So, number three, writing the thesis dissertation proposals, the big picture. So, when you're writing your thesis and your dissertation proposal, a lot of times we can get lost in the research. We kind of get lost in the muck and mire of what it means to write this large body. And for many of us, it's the first time that we've ever took on a project this large in our educational development. So I want you to think about these four major questions when you're writing. You're going to think about the what, how, why, and when, right? The what, how, why, and when. What is it that I want to research? What's my intended topic? Why do I feel strongly about this, right? Then I need to think about how I intend to study this topic. What's my methodology like? Do I want this to be a quantitative study, meaning that do I want to use numerical data, or do I want this to be a qualitative study, meaning do I want to look at the work of other experts to inform what it is that I'm doing? I need to look at the why. A lot of times we take on these ideas and we want to do something just so magnificent, so powerful, and that's wonderful. But you need to make sure that there's some foundation for your work. Because one of the things that often gets doctoral students stopped at that process between dissertation and graduation is that sometimes they've taken on a prospect so lofty that they can't finish it. So you always want to make sure that there is some foundation or some previous research that is related to what it is that you plan on doing so that you can get this project finished. And you can do all the other magnificent stuff when you get out of school. But we want to be finished and we want to make sure that what we're doing has some sort of foundation and that the research that we can actually prove and backs up what it is that we're trying to say. And the last, when? When will I complete this work? Make sure that you've established a timeline for yourself because that's something else that happens quite often. How many of us, and you can give me a thumbs up on this, how many of you know people that were really, really smart people, right? but they still ended up ABD, all but dissertation. They got stopped at the dissertation process. Does anybody know anybody like that? Right? I had a colleague when I used to teach the AE, and now graduate programs are a lot more hands-on and engaging in terms of helping the students, because now programs really understand that it's not just about enrollment, but what people are looking at is your completion rate, right? But when I did my doctorate years ago, there weren't a whole lot of programs that were concerned about helping you get out of school. And so I knew so many people that were brilliant, but they got stuck at ABD, all but dissertation, finished all the coursework, finished their comprehensive exams, but they could not complete that dissertation. And one of the things that happens more often than not is that when that dissertation process becomes wonky because they have not established a timeline. So establishing a timeline is very important, because when you start working with your committee or your advisor, you need to know, right? You need to know that they're working on a schedule, and you got to adhere to that schedule, and you need to commit to certain times yourself. So if that means that until you get this doctoral work finished, that you're going to commit 5 hours a week to your research. And 5 hours a week, just to say it, sounds like a whole lot. But what is 2 hours after church? 2 hours first thing Saturday morning, and maybe an hour or two during the week. You'd be surprised how much you can knock out if you have those committed times when you're working. Writing the proposal. First off, the first part of the proposal that you're going to be drafting up is your purpose, right? The purpose is you explaining to your advisor or your committee the why of your research. Why is this important, right? What is it that you need for this audience to understand? Or what is it that you're trying to get your audience to understand? What is it that you're trying to persuade them to believe? Because you have to remember that your audience is not just Joe Blow and Susie Homemaker, but your audience is a group of experts, right? These are your professors who had years in academia that are going to be looking at this. And so when you're explaining in this proposal what it is you plan on researching, you need to make sure that you're demonstrating to them your comprehension, but also that this academic work that you're developing is such that it is worthy of study. Okay, so it's very, very much a persuasive work.
Miss Hall.
Did I have a question?
Yes, ma'am. I
Okay,
was I was going to ask, will this presentation be shared?
will it be shared? You talk? Are you saying after I record it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It will. It
Okay.
will. I'm going to
Thank
try to post it to our social media channels and our YouTube.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. And guys, you got to forgive me because I've been teaching so long. If you don't stop me, if you don't raise your hand or you say, Dr. Hall, I have a question, I'll keep going. So let me know if you have a question about anything that I've said so far. Raise your hand and I'll make a point, make it a point to stop and hear, make it a point to stop and hear what you say. Anybody have any questions about anything I've said thus far? Okay, so I'll keep going. And it'll be black. Okay. All right. Proposal writing and anxiety. General is so you remember I told you that one of the biggest hurdles for most master's and doctoral students is usually the writing process. And this is why we find so many people that will make it to the finish line but not cross, right? They'll make it to the finish line, but they're not able to cross. And it is usually because they get stuck in a certain position, and they have not mastered that when, that how, and that why that we discussed earlier, right? And that when is going to be that when you graduate, it's not just about your advisors, but it's going to be placed on your shoulders, which means that you've got to do a number of things. Number one, I mentioned before, you got to establish a writing schedule. You got to establish a writing schedule. The next thing you want to do is, I want you to think about this as if you were writing a book of some sort, right? So this topic that you're choosing, or this academic endeavor that you're choosing to research, you need to make sure that you're writing. Don't get stuck in your head and be like, well, I can't think of anything. I've got brain freeze. I don't know. Sometimes you just got to write. You just got to write. You can go back and add to and correct later on, but write, right? One of the things that I do as a writer is I keep a notebook always, right? I have little journals. If you can see this, I have little journals like this everywhere in my office. I just disappeared. I have journals everywhere around my office and my house, just like this, right? Because I'm constantly jotting down ideas about new ways to research things, or new ideas that I want to develop a little bit more. And that helps you. And even if you don't have a journal or something readily at your disposal, use the Notes app on your phone. I'm infamous for using the Notes app on my phone because as an academic, you're constantly having these ideas about things that you want to develop. So having something readily available to record these things is going to be invaluable to you. It's going to be really, really invaluable to you. Because if you're not careful, what happened is you'll say, you know what, I had an idea, but I can't remember what I was going to write about. Like, I had started, and next thing I know, this the idea disappeared. It'll come back to me. No, it won't. Use it won't come back, guys. you know so you want to make sure that you are jotting down those ideas in some sort of journal or in the Notes app in your phone, so that when you go back to your writing, because it'll happen to you throughout the day, because you're an academic, that brain is always churning out ideas. So you want to write these things down so that when you have your dedicated research time, this is something that you can develop further. Okay. Next thing, you also want to make sure that you're composing different parts. Like, let's say, for instance, while you may be working on the purpose and the justification of your research, there's a part called the annotated bibliography. Who knows what an annotated bibliography is? Okay. So an annotated bibliography is essentially a list of the sources that you're going to use in your research. And after each source, what you're going to do is you're going to have an annotation, right? Which is basically a summary of what the work is about and how you plan to use it in your research. And this can get really lengthy, right? This is part of your research proposal. This can get kind of lengthy. So you need to make sure that you're jotting this information down as you're finding new works to use in your research. Now, that does not mean because you included in your research proposal that you're tied to that you're tied to using these particular works. Because as you research, you may find something newer research, you may find something that is more relevant to what it is that you're trying to produce. But when you're doing that first research proposal, you need to make sure that you're establishing a list of sources. So that annotated bibliography is going to be central to your research. Proposal writing and anxiety, specific advice. Think about it like this. A proposal, your dissertation proposal or your thesis proposal is just that. What is somebody tell me what a proposal is? If I propose something to you, what am I doing? Anybody, somebody?
In essence, making an offer.
Right. I'm just, this is something that I intend to do, but it's not set in stone. This is something I'm intending to do, but it's not set in stone. For example, if somebody proposes to somebody, he intends to marry this woman, but that doesn't mean that it's gonna happen. They may not make it to the altar, right? But it is what is intended to happen. So in the very same way, when you're writing your research proposal, don't get so bogged down or overwhelmed by the idea that I'm going to have to stick to this to infinity and beyond. No, right? Your advisor and your committee understands that as you're researching, because you're academic at this point, and as you research, sometimes some of the information that you use is going to change. So you're not, what you're writing is not stuck in stone. But we need to have a general idea of what it is that we're going to write. And so you also, another important thing is, guys, you got to be flexible, right? Because one of the other things that I've seen more often than not, finishing the doctorate is not necessarily just about how smart you are, but it is about your persistence and your consistency, right? Your persistence and your consistency. Meaning persistent, I keep going, right? Consistent meaning I'm doing the same thing. Like I'm a creature of habit. I'm regimented. So what happens is that you also got to understand that if you're a dissertation advisor or your chair tells you that you need to make certain changes, folks, don't start a melee. Don't argue back and forth. Listen to what they have to say and implement the changes. Otherwise, you're going to elongate the process. Is that making sense to everybody? Give me a thumbs up if this is making sense.
Yes.
Because I've seen it in terms of, I'll give you an example. I have a friend right at this moment who is finishing his doctorate. He's finishing up his doctorate. And he's having so much back and forth with his chair, with his dissertation chair. And one of the things that he wants to do is he wants to get a new dissertation chair, right? But because he doesn't want to change what he's already written. Bad idea. Often when you enlist other people and you get rid of the old person because maybe you feel like you don't want to make those changes, what you're doing is prolonging your work. You're prolonging the work, and it's not necessarily a given that this new advisor is going to be of the same mindset. They might share the same ideology or same belief that that former advisor had, right? Or they may have talked to that former advisor and you're still stuck in the same situation. Now you simply added time to the process. And time is a luxury that we don't have to give, right? Because most of you, and give me a thumbs up if I'm correct, most of you are working adults that have given yourself a timeline. Am I correct in that assumption? Okay. And you're like, I don't have time to add time. And them told me I could be through in 3 years, and I need to be through in 3 years. Give me a thumbs up if that's what you said. Okay. So those things are very important. Now, also, right, I love the idea of a cohort. I love the cohort because I think that being a part of a cohort is so empowering. And the wonderful thing for you guys is that being a part of a cohort, you kind of have one another to lean on, right? And I know many of you are, because many of you are completely virtual, you're in very, very different places. But you can still, because of the power and the connected nature of the internet, you guys can still have writing groups. You can still have writing groups because I want you to think about forming a writing group, because the writing group is going to help keep you on task. I'll give you an example. Um, when I did my doctoral work again, I was straight brick and mortar. There was no online programming at my institution. There was no cohort model. It was every man for themselves. So, sometimes that can kind of be lonely, right? But what happened, one of the beautiful things is that during that time, I was also I was also a lecturer, full-time lecturer at the institution where I was getting my doctorate. And one of my office mate was getting her doctorate at UGA, but she was kind of going back and forth between UGA and Atlanta. And so my office mate was not only working on her doctorate, but she's also a published author, really famous, been in Essence magazine, and all these wonderful things. And so her name is her pen name is Grace Octavia, if anybody wants to look her up. But her real name is Dr. Reed. And so one of the things that Dr. Reed would do is, because I could be one of those people, I get caught on an idea and I don't want to let go of it because I think it's so profound. Dr. Reed, even though she was in another program at another institution, she would make me go with her, and we would have writing days. We might go to Whole Foods on a Saturday and stay at Whole Foods from 10 to 2. We may meet at a coffee shop on Thursday after we get through teaching class, because maybe we didn't have class on Thursday, and we stay at the coffee shop from 2 to 7 or 3 to 7. And these were long stints. Long periods of time that she and I would have these writing workshops. And when I would be tempted to let a little attention deficit kick in, she'd be like, Carolyn, sit down. We still write. I start talking, Carolyn, with this is not for conversation. We're not communicating right now. We're writing, right? And sometimes you need people like that who are going to keep their hand in your back, right? And push you. And so you guys sort of need to be that for one another. And even if you're long distance, start scheduling you some team meetings or some Zoom meetings where you all can collaborate and make sure that you're writing. And that may seem, you say, well, Dr. Hall, I mean, we're virtual, but still, you still have your, Miss Hood has Miss Baldwin on the line. Miss Hood is telling Miss Baldwin, she was like, girl, we about to sit in front of this computer for the next 3 hours and we are writing. Okay. I told Junior to take the kids to the park and we're going to use this time to write. So whatever it is that you have to do to motivate one another is going to be very important. So establishing writing groups, whether that be virtually or face to face, right? You need to make sure that you start collaborating with your cohort members. All right. The last thing that will kind of help you get over this writing anxiety, make sure that you're having consistent conversations with your advisor. You need to be having consistent conversations with your advisor. And everybody knows, does everybody know who their advisor is? Give me a thumbs up if you do. Okay. So some do, some don't. Okay. If you're not quite sure who your advisor is, I probably would ask, maybe send a little note to my department chair, send a note to your department chair and ask who that advisor is, and even ask your chair some questions about moving forward, because you got to make sure, because see, none of this is going to mean anything if you're not going in the direction that they're telling you to go in, right? Because you may start all this research and they say, well, I don't like that. Well, somebody's already done that. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? So you want to make sure that throughout this process, you're keeping an active line of communication with your advisor or your committee. Does anybody have any questions about anything I've said thus far? Nope.
When you mentioned the advisor, you're talking about the dissertation advisor, or you're talking about the department advisor?
Your dissertation advisor.
Thank you.
But Mr. Sawyer, you can ask your department advisor who that advisor is if you haven't been assigned one yet. Okay, did it change for me? Okay. So these are the parts of your proposal, First is your title. With that title, right, you want to check departmental guidelines, because some programs may or may not use some of these parts in this proposal, but most programs usually are. So make sure, right, that you've looked at your student handbook or whatever guide they have given you that shows you or explains to you what the parts of your dissertation or thesis proposal are, because you want to stay in alignment with what this department has asked of you. Okay. But the first thing that your advisor is going to see is the title. And so that title is going to be very, very important. And one of the things that I always tell students is your title is going to be your first glimpse into your research, and it needs to let that person know, right? What it is you're researching and what stance you have on it. What stance you have on whatever it is you're researching. Because remember, I told you in the beginning, a research proposal is kind of like a persuasive document, because you're really arguing that this is a thing worthy of academic study. It's something that is worthy of academic study. So you need to make sure that your title is clear and specific, what you're researching and what your stance is on it. Okay. The next thing that you're going to have is your abstract. The abstract essentially is what I'll call sort of an overview of what your research is about, right? It's an overview of what it is about. Like, let's say, for instance, that if you're getting your PhD in curriculum, you're getting your EDD or PhD in curriculum and instruction, and you are writing about culturally relevant teaching, right? In that abstract, what you're going to be doing is explaining probably what culturally relevant teaching is and why it is important. What culturally relevant teaching is and why it's important, right? The next thing is the introduction and background. I also need for you to know that, let me go back to title. When you create this title, again, this is a research proposal. So that means that this is not necessarily written in stone. So don't overthink it, but do make it such that it is argumentative and you are stating your stance on whatever your research is. If your advisor tells you to go back and tweak the title a little bit, that's not a really big thing, but you need to have something that is available. It's a working title, meaning it's a work in progress. That's how I want you to think of it. It is a work in progress. And that's very, very important. And it also should be engaging. It should also be engaging, meaning that you want to have something that's going to draw your committee in. Because remember, I told you, your work is not going to be read by Joe Blow and Susie Homemaker. Your work is going to be read by academicians, people who are experts in their field of study. So you want to make sure that it's going to be something that is going to pull them in. Next, your your introduction and your background. Make sure also that in very early on in this particular section that you're setting the stage, right? And explaining why your topic matters so much. That's what you're doing in your introduction / background. You're setting the stage for your research by explaining, right? And illustrating why your topic matters or why your topic should matter to those that are reading it. Okay? That's what you're doing in that introduction background. However, now while you're setting the stage doesn't mean I give you the whole play, does it? Because what do you think? Somebody tell me, what do you think is going to happen if I give too much information too soon? Nobody? Okay. If I give too much information too soon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to overwhelm my reader, right? I front loaded too much. It's what we call information overload. We don't want to do information overload. We want to give that reader just enough so that they understand the direction of where we're going in our research. Okay. Next thing, the statement of the problem. The statement of the problem. What is the statement of the problem? The statement of the problem essentially is showing how it means that in this particular section, you're going to illustrate how there is a problem a problem, whatever it is you're researching, and you're going to build that problem from the existing scholarship, right? You're going to build that problem from existing scholarship. Remember how in the beginning I talked to you about quantitative and qualitative? So you're going to make sure that you're finding quality sources from academicians who have written about this problem before, right? Because that is what you're using to inform, right? Inform your research is this existing scholarship. And so when you find this existing scholarship, you also need to make sure that it is up to date. Somebody tell me, why would it be important that your scholarship is up to date? Does anybody know why? Or want to take a guess? Mr. Sawyer, you've been helping me out. Help me out. Why would it be important that your scholarship or the information that you're using is recent and up to date?
So, because of changes in research, because of changes in trends, you want to make sure that, as a professional, we represent what's currently happening, what's currently going on.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. So, as
You're welcome.
As the future Dr. Sawyer said, information is always changing, right? And so, as an academician, you want to make sure that you're always on top of what is being said. For example, if you were doing something on curriculum and development right now and you were not talking about AI, you'd be a little bit behind the curve. Why? Because AI is becoming essentially a part of everything that we do. And so even as educators, we need to make sure that we stay on top of understanding how AI can be used in our classrooms. When new things happen as academicians and scholars, we can't be afraid. We have to embrace it and use it to not just inform our learning, but to empower and equip the students that we plan to teach, right? So we always want to make sure that we stay on what is most recent. Doesn't mean we can't include other informed works, right? Doesn't mean that at all. But what it does mean is that most of our research needs to be up to date. It needs to be recent. What are they saying now? What are they doing now? Next, your research questions, your purpose, your aim, your rationale. This is very, very important. So what happens is this section, this particular section of your proposal is going to clarify what your research is going to accomplish. It's going to clarify what your research is going to accomplish. And you got to make sure that it directly aligns with your problem statement. You got to make sure that it directly aligns with your problem statement. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you an example. So let's say, for instance, my I'm just going to make up a quick title, right? My research proposal is about the inevitability of AI, the inevitability of AI in classrooms, in classroom curriculum, right? So in that, somebody tell me what would I be arguing if that was my title? What would I be arguing? What's the point that I'm going to be arguing in my research if that is my title?
State the title again, please.
The inevitability of AI in classroom curriculum. Okay, so what I'll be arguing essentially is that there's no way for us to create a curriculum that does not contain or does not use artificial intelligence. There's going to be no way to get around it. That's what I'm going to be arguing. And that's going to be an argument because you have a number of educators who are very adverse to using AI in the classroom, right? And so my paper is going to be arguing that there's no way to get around it. People might not like it, but there's no way to get around using AI to inform our classroom curriculum and to empower our students in our classroom, because even if you don't use it, they will. All right. So that's what my problem statement is going to be. So when I start to create my research questions, I need to make sure that those research questions align. Those research questions need to align with what it is that I'm trying to argue. So I need to be clear, right? I need to be clear about those questions informing my goals and my research, right? So I've got to be clear about what my study will address. I got to be clear about what my study will address. So one of those questions that are birthed from that particular title in my mind would be, how can we use AI to improve classroom curriculum and student learning outcomes? Very simple question, but again, it's working title, and these research questions are just like a working title, meaning that my research has the ability to change, but my advisors and my committee need to see that I'm thinking about a bigger picture. And I have some basis for what it is I plan to prove. And we know there's a lot of research out there about the use of AI. A lot of schools and a lot of institutions, higher learning and secondary education, have had to institute AI policies, because otherwise they would have all kind of crazy issues with plagiarism, and because there's so many students that if we don't teach them how to use AI responsibly, what we're going to have is a bunch of people that are just copying and pasting from the computer, right? So my research is going to show how we can sort of pivot in terms of moving from plagiarism to actually using it to help us, to empower the students and empower us as educators. Is everybody still following this train? Is it making sense? Give me a thumbs up. So you want to make sure that these research questions are in alignment with what it is you're trying to prove, okay? The next thing that you have in your proposal packet is a literature review. Does anybody already know what a literature review is? Okay, Ms. Bynum, tell us what a literature review is.
It is the section that we developed with all of our references that we will use to tell about our study.
Okay. Ms. Roach, did you want to add on to that?
Literature review is all the sources that you'll be using in your study, peer review sources, books that you'll be using, and it gives a brief description of each of the sources.
Okay. So it goes in line, it pretty much is like the annotated bibliography that I was talking about before. But I also need for you to understand that what it is not a book report, right? It is not a book report. It's not just a summary of the sources, but it really is sort of an argument about what is known about this topic and what is not known about the topic, what needs to be elaborated on. So it's you really can call it like a scholarly conversation about the tools or the books that you'll be using to inform your research. Okay, so the key points of your literature review are very, very important. The key points of your literature review are essentially that you're going to be showing that not only have you read these things, you've read these books, that you've been doing the research, but you have something more that can be added to this academic study. You have something that can better this particular study, that will help academicians in the future learn something more. That's what your job is going to be in that rationale. Okay. Now with your methodology, methodology simply means how I'm going to study what I'm going to study. I'm going to say that again. How am I going to study? How am I going to study what it is that I'm studying or prove what it is that I'm studying? So your methodology is really it's got to be detailed. It's got to be detailed. And so when you talk about your method, right? Whether it be qualitative, quantitative, again, and qualitative meaning that you're going to be using just expert research and books and information to inform your work, or quantitative meaning you're going to look at statistical studies. You're going to look at a lot of data, right? A lot of data to inform what it is that you're trying to prove in your research. Whatever it is, whatever sort of methodology that you use, you need to make sure that you introduce the approach and explain why you're using that particular approach. Why is it necessary that when you talk about the inevitability of AI in creating classroom curriculum, that you're using data? Why? Because data is going to better inform the study. Because if you can show that 70% of students in higher education are already using AI to write papers, then it would behoove people to know that they're already using this. So now it's time to pivot and help them use it responsibly. It's time to pivot and help these students use this information responsibly. Now, before I move forward, does anybody have any questions or any concerns about anything I've said thus far? No? Okay. So I'll keep going. Next on the list is significance and implications. Significance and implications. Does anybody want to take a stab at what that means or what you think it means? Significance and implications. What do you think this part of your research proposal is going to do? I won't, I promise you, if you get it wrong and you try it, I will not embarrass you. But I do want to hear your thoughts. What do you think this part of your proposal? Okay, Mr. Sawyer.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier about, in essence, sharing why it matters, why is this work important, and what benefit will it have to the community.
Very good, very good, very good. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. Okay, that's exactly what it is. Why does this study even matter, right? Why is this? Why should anybody even care about what you're talking about? So in establishing the why, you've got to make sure that it addresses both scholarly and practical applications. Like on one hand, there is academic value, but on the other hand, there is also a very practical value in what it is that you're researching and your research offers, right? There's a very practical value, meaning that this can be applied in some way. This is not just my big brain is thinking of all these wonderful ideas, but this can be applied to academia in such a way that it is going to improve something. It is going to improve something. Okay. The next section is the overview of chapters. The overview of chapters. The overview of chapters is basically it is your chapter outline that helps committees assess whether your study is feasible, right? It is the just an outline showing what chapters you're going to include in your study. And it's only like, let's say for instance, you're going to have 7 chapters in your dissertation. You might only write 2 or 3 sentences about each chapter, right? Because you wouldn't be able to write too much because you haven't actually started the dissertation process. What you've done is you're writing the proposal right now, right? You're trying to prove that what you want to research is worthy. So this is where the proposal comes in. So when you have the overview of the chapters, you having 1 to 3 sentences about what you believe each chapter is going to cover is enough to give your advisor or your committee some idea of the focus of your work. All right?
Quick question. Quick
Yes,
question
sir.
while you're there about the chapters. Is there a template for what the dissertation should look like? For example, is this in essence, a 5-chapter dissertation, or I know you mentioned about 7 chapters, what have you. Is there a standard template for the graduate school for what the dissertation should look like? Excuse me.
It is. And I tell you what I plan on. I got 2 things because I never want to leave my attendees empty-handed. So I have a PDF that kind of goes more into detail about each of these things because I know we only have a limited amount of time to cover so much information, right? So I have that, and what I'll also do is I will I will find a template that you can kind of use that will help you, get some sort of illustration of what that should look like. Because I'm a visual learner and I need to see a thing, right? So what I'll do is I'll also get that for you, Mr. Sawyer, and send it out to everybody. Okay. Next is my plan of work. The next part of my proposal is my plan of work. My plan of work should be my time. That's my timeline, right? In the plan, in how I plan on getting this done. So I want to make sure that I give myself time for data collection and also the time for my revision cycles. Who knows what a revision cycle is? Anybody want to take a stab at it? What is a revision cycle? Okay. A revision cycle is the length of time that your advisor or your committee gives you after they've looked at your proposal or after they've looked at your dissertation and they made comments and feedback. The revision cycle is the length of time between them making revisions and how long they give you to make the corrections and send it back to them. So what you want to make sure you do is stick to that timeline, stick to that revision cycle. But what I will say to you is do not be too ambitious in setting a timeline for yourself, because the last thing you want to do is to overwhelm yourself with creating a short timeline that you can't stick to. Because again, you all are not just students, but you're also working adults with real lives who are very, very busy people. So you want to make sure that you give yourself time, but give yourself breathing room. Everybody still following? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. And so the last part is your bibliography. Your bibliography. Again, that working bibliography is the same thing. You want to make sure that you cite your sources. And do you all use MLA, APA, or K-Turabian? Which style of documentation do you use?
APA.
APA.
APA, okay. So make sure you have that APA handbook. It's going to be your best friend, okay? And also, if there are APA, I know at the beginning of I bit my tongue. At the beginning of the semester, we paired up with the graduate school to do an APA workshop. Was anybody in here able to attend an APA workshop? Give me a thumbs up if you went. Okay, so nobody. All right, so what I'll do is I'll also send you the information from that APA workshop. It's just a quick little book that kind of gives you an overview on quick tips for APA documentation, because APA can be a bit challenging sometimes. So you want to make sure that you have an APA handbook as your best friend, right? Because your documentation, it matters. It matters as a scholar. You've got to make sure that your sources are documented appropriately. Okay, so those are the parts of your proposal. Those are the parts of your proposal. So I'm going to skip down now I think we pretty much covered everything, but did anybody have any other questions about anything we talked about thus far? Any questions? Okay. And so what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to make sure that I send you those things. And if you can, just as a reminder, send me an email. And my email address is carolyn.hall@aamu.edu. That again, that is, I'll write it in the chat because I'm just realizing we had a chat. Anybody have any comments in here? Okay. Okay. So what I want for you guys to do is send me an email, and I'm having you send me this email not because I don't see your names on here tonight, but when you send me an email, that'll help me keep you on the list so that when we have events in the future, I'll be able to tag you. And I'm also going to send you a survey, and I really, really need for you to complete the survey for me. Let me tell you why this is important. Because as we move forward, even into the summertime, right? I want to be able to have workshops that are going to be essential to helping you in this process. I want to be able to have workshops that are going to equip you to do this successfully and so that you won't be overwhelmed with this. So please make sure you fill out that survey for me and go ahead and email me. Go ahead and email me at that email address. If you guys don't have any more questions, I think that is it. Does anybody have any other questions that you want to pose before we leave? Even if you write it in the chat, I'm fine with that. Now answer from the chat. No? Okay. Well, all right. If that is all, I thank you all, and I hope you all have a blessed night and good luck on this journey. Godspeed to each one of you. And if you have any additional questions or concerns, please feel free to email me. I'd love to answer. Okay. And we also have a graduate writing center. And while I don't help with individual papers, like I'm not the person that helps with the individual paper, there is a graduate writing center for that. I do want to make sure that we have appropriate technologies to help you during your process. But you all have a blessed evening, and thank you again for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.